ಹಲವಾರು ಸಾರ್ವಜನಿಕ ಸ್ಥಳಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಫಾಲುನ್ ದಾಫಾವನ್ನು ಪ್ರತಿನಿತ್ಯ ಅಭ್ಯಸಿಸಲಾಗುತ್ತಿದೆ. ಈ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಲು ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸುಸ್ವಾಗತ ಮತ್ತು ಫಾಲುನ್ ದಾಫಾ ಎಲ್ಲ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನು ಉಚಿತವಾಗಿ ಮಾಡಲಾಗುವುದು. ಇದು ಸ್ವ ಇಚ್ಛೆ ಮತ್ತು ಸ್ವ ಪ್ರೇರಣೆಯಿಂದ ಮಾಡುವ ಅಭ್ಯಾಸವಾಗಿರುವುದರಿಂದ ಇದರ ಸ್ವಯಂ ಸೇವಕರು ಯಾವುದೇ ಫಲಾಪೇಕ್ಷೆ ಇಲ್ಲದೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ಸ್ಥಳದಲ್ಲಾದರೂ ಮತ್ತು ಯಾರಿಗಾದರೂ ಫಾಲುನ್ ದಾಫಾ ಚಟುವಟಿಕೆಗಳನ್ನು ನಡೆಸುವರು.
The commission will come to order, and I want to begin first by welcoming each and every one of you here. Senator Tom Cotton, who is a member of the commission, a former member of the House, now serving with great distinction over on the Senate side, and of course Commissioner Pittenger, who is also a totally dedicated human rights advocate, and I want to thank him for his leadership on all issues related to China, but also religious freedom around the world. We'll now go to Mr. Gutman.
In order to piece together the story of how mass organ harvesting of prisoners of conscience evolved in China, I spoke with medical professionals, Chinese law enforcement, and over 100 refugees. My interviews began in 2006, and my book, The Slaughter, was published last year. Now, I was not the first to examine this issue in depth. That distinction belongs to David Kilgore and David Matus, the authors of the seminal Bloody Harvest report of 2006. Nor will I be the last. The World Organization to Investigate the Persecution of Falun Gong, a group of Chinese investigators scattered throughout the world, have just completed their own study. Now, based on our collective evidence, here is a brief timeline of what we know. In 1994, the first live organ harvests of death row prisoners were performed on the execution grounds of Xinjiang in northwest China. In 1997, following the Gulzhou massacre, the first political prisoners, Uyghur activists, were harvested on behalf of high-ranking Chinese Communist Party cadres. In 1999, Chinese state security launched its largest action of scale since the Cultural Revolution, the eradication of Falun Gong. In 2000, hospitals across China began ramping up their facilities for what would become an unprecedented explosion in China's transplant activity. And by the end of that year, well over 1 million Falun Gong practitioners were incarcerated in labor camps, detention centers, psychiatric facilities, and black jails. By 2001, Chinese military hospitals were unambiguously targeting select Falun Gong prisoners for organ harvesting. By 2003, the first Tibetans were being targeted as well. And by the end of 2005, China's transplant apparatus had increased so dramatically that a tissue-matched organ could be located within 2 weeks for any foreign organ tourist with cash on hand. While the execution of death row prisoners, hardened criminals, supplied some of the organs, the majority were extracted from Falun Gong practitioners. And this was a fact that wasn't even being kept all that secret from the prisoner population visiting foreign surgeons or potential customers. Now, Kilgore and Matus estimate 41,500 transplants were sourced from Falun Gong between 2000 to 2005. I estimate 65,000 Falun Gong practitioners were murdered for their organs from 2000 to 2008. The World Organization to Investigate the Persecution of Falun Gong believes the numbers are more likely in the hundreds of thousands. In early 2006, the Epoch Times revealed the first allegations of the organ harvesting of Falun Gong and was followed by the Kilgore-Matus report. By 2008, many analysts, and I was among them, assumed that the Chinese state would stop harvesting prisoners of conscience for fear of international condemnation during the Beijing Olympics. Yet the physical examination of Falun Gong prisoners for their retail organs actually showed a slight uptick. In 2012, Wang Lijun, Bo Xilai's right-hand man, attempted to defect at the U.S. consulate in Chengdu. 2 weeks later, the World Organization to Investigate the Persecution of Falun Gong revealed that Wang had personally received a prestigious award for overseeing thousands of organ extractions and transplants, fatally exposed Chinese medical authorities declared to the Western press that they would cease organ harvesting of death row prisoners over the next 5 years. Yet no mention was made of prisoners of conscience, and third-party verification was rejected. It is during this period, from 2012 to the present day, even as the Chinese medical authorities spoke publicly of shortages due to relying on voluntary organ donation, that a very strange anomaly occurs. While China's hospitals have maintained strict internet silence on their transplant activity since 2006, the hiring of transplant teams at many of the most notorious hospitals for harvesting prisoners of conscience is actually on the increase. In a handful of hospitals, for example, Beijing 309 Military Hospital, it's practically exponential. Now, witness accounts shed some light on this mystery. One spoke to me about 500 Falun Gong prisoners having been examined for their organs in a single day. That is the largest cattle call that I know of. A Western doctor was recently assured by a Chinese military hospital surgeon that prisoners are still being slaughtered for their organs. And Falun Gong practitioners across China's provinces have described police forcibly administering blood tests and DNA cheek swabs, not in prison, not in a detention center, but in their homes. Now, I can't supply a death count for House Christians, Uyghurs, and Tibetans. But if I had to make an estimate on Falun Gong, I would double my previous numbers. I'm sure the World Organization to investigate the persecution of Falun Gong would go much further. Either way, 2 points are clear. The official number of Chinese transplants per year, 10,000, is a fiction. The real number is likely 3 times that. And the serial public declarations by the Chinese medical establishment of a new ethical environment for transplantation is simply a privacy shield to murder prisoners of conscience. What can we do? We are not the moral arbitrators of this tragedy, but neither is the World Health Organization or the Transplantation Society. The moral authority belongs to families across China who have lost loved ones. Until we can hear their voices, we need, at a minimum, to follow our convictions. Now, I am not a lawyer, but in my layman's understanding, medical privacy ends when there's a gunshot involved. Why then do we adhere to strict medical privacy when there's an organ sourced in China? Why can't we even make a proper estimate of how many Americans receive transplants in China? Why do we have to make guesses based on a humorous, feel-good account like Larry's kidney? This is an obscenity. For an American to go to China for an organ in 2015 is to participate in an ongoing crime against humanity. So I ask you to remove our privacy shield. And until the Chinese state offers the full and comprehensive accounting that the world demands, I ask you to follow the example of 2 very small but brave countries, Israel and now just recently Taiwan, and ban organ tourism to China.
Do you think the U.S. government reporting on the issue of organ harvesting has been sufficient? Have you found receptivity to your research at the U.S. Department of State? And what would be your recommendations to the U.S. government and Congress on how to combat the problem of organ tourism?
The first thing I would like to see is that the Department of State tell us exactly what Wang Lijun said during the 24 hours he was in the Chengdu consulate. I think everybody knows that something went on and that he talked about organ harvesting. There can't be any real question that he did speak about organ harvesting. But we don't really know what was said. Now, my theory, and I think it's the theory, sort of an operating theory within Washington, really, is that he basically said, yes, we've been doing this for some time and so forth, that he basically did some sort of confession. If that's not true, the State Department should tell us. This is really important information. This is critical. The rest of that question, in a sense, is just typical bureaucratic inertia in Washington. I mean, okay, I understand that. If I can go to this sort of to take the question to right now, sort of following on what Wei Jingsheng was saying about this is the time, whether they're financially on the ropes, this is the time to push on human rights. And I have mixed feelings about this. And one of the interesting things about being an outsider is that I can kind of observe what's going on within the Falun Gong community and sort of see the debates that goes on in that community. And one of the things that happen, you have 2 views right now about Xi and his leadership. And one is that it's kind of the hope springs eternal side, which is, she has possibilities. Bo Shi lies in jail. Zhou Yongkang's gone. Jiang Zemin, they're doing lawsuits in Jiang Zemin. The whole dead hand faction is being attacked. And they see all kinds of possibilities in this. And the feeling is that if the U.S. government would just push, then really we could get some answers to this. There is another view, which I think is more aligned with this report that I was showing you, which is she is expanding organ harvesting, and that's the facts on the ground seem to bear that out. Now, then there's a kind of a synthesis view, which I subscribe to, which is, look, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. It's always the problem, yes? And so in this case, we do have a cover-up going on, and that can be more lethal. In fact, I mean, if you think about it in sort of extreme terms, concentration camps about to be overrun by Allied soldiers, they kill everybody and they burn the place down. So this, for people in the Laogai system, this is actually a very dangerous time, and that obviously includes Uyghurs. We've seen this on the Uyghur community on a vast scale, and we've seen the level of enforced disappearances of the Uyghur community go up. It's another exponential curve. My view is a little different than both of those, or even the synthesis, which is it's a very pessimistic view. This is a structural problem within the Chinese Communist Party. They will keep repeating these kinds of things, and it is not the crime but the cover-up, and so it doesn't matter really who's in power because they're always dealing with the last cover-up. Okay, so it doesn't matter if Xi Jinping would like to end persecution of Falun Gong and Uyghurs and Tibetans today. He really can't because there's too many skeletons in the closet. And in that case, if that's true, then maybe the answer for Washington is what I'm proposing is the best we can do, maybe, is at least limit our own moral decay in these areas. That is, so we take the Google, this is, I've always argued this in business, that Google should not be in China. Google should be out of China. Cisco should have been completely banned from China. They should have really been held to terms for what they did in terms of surveillance, and they actually were holding a database that was allowed to arrest Falun Gong practitioners. But the same is true here in the medical field. We're allowing this to just go on. We're allowing doctors, there are doctors in the Transplantation Society who are considering starting joint ventures in China. This is a line the West can't cross. That is my view, is that if at least we can get to that, we can't agree on everything when it comes to China, and not in Washington. But we can agree on some basic moral principles, and these are basic moral principles where we sense that we're crossing a line, we're involved in some terrible way with these kinds of atrocities that have been described here today.
I want to thank each and every one of you for your expert witness, for your passion for human rights and democracy, and it really has helped this commission know exactly where we are and what we ought to be doing, and I thank you again for being here today. This hearing is adjourned.
ಸರಿ ವೀಕ್ಷಕರೇ, ಇಂದಿನ ಸಂಚಿಕೆ ಮುಗಿಸುವ ಸಮಯ ಬಂತು. ಮುಂದಿನ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತಷ್ಟು ವ್ಯಾಯಾಮಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಳಿಯೋಣ. ಅಲ್ಲಿಯವರೆಗೂ ತಪ್ಪದೆ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರಿ ಹಂಸ ಟಿವಿ. ನಮಸ್ತೆ.